version of my journal. I'm Stephanie Rivers. We're multicasting on several platforms, so you could be watching on YouTube or LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook. On whatever platform you're watching, we know you're going to enjoy the conversation. So at some point, we want you to like, share, and subscribe so that when I post new videos, you'll be the first to know. So, what's the conversation about today? Well, Atlanta is known as the Black Mecca, a place where Black people thrive at every turn. That's because 5.6 million people live in the greater Atlanta area. 47%, almost half of them, are Black or African American. Now, I grew up in Tennessee, just a few hours drive from Atlanta. So I've been there lots of times, and I know lots of people. My friends from high school and college moved there to advance. Even though Atlanta has proven itself as a great place for Black people to thrive, it's not immune to issues that plague progress for Black people. Now, here to talk about it is Nicole Carr. She's an award-winning investigative journalist, a professor, and a speaker based in the Atlanta area. So we want to welcome Nicole Carr to the show. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Stephanie.
So before we jump in, you most recently worked with WSB TV and ProPublica, and you explored a lot, or was your beat, your focus, race, politics, and parental rights? Is that kind of what you focused on?
Yeah, that's where I've been over the last few years with ProPublica, and kind of what led to the tip for this most recent investigation, which falls into the entertainment industry, government, and politics here in Atlanta. Mhm.
So one of the stories that I read of yours that you were working on was about the movie executive, movie studio owner Ryan Millsap, and what what had come about due to a lawsuit. I'm going to try to show his picture. What had come about due to a lawsuit. Um, from one of his business associates. And it just showed, and this is a picture of Ryan Millsap in front of Black Hall Studios that he created. And what it showed was that he essentially was presenting himself as one person in front of everyone, but then the text messages showed that how he really felt about Black people and Jewish people. And so that was your article, your work, along with some of your colleagues. So I just wanted to talk about it today. So what led you to, is this just what you do? You kind of like see what are some of the issues that you feel like as an investigative journalist that people need to know more about? How did you come across this story about Ryan Millsap?
Sure. So we got a tip that these text messages existed in an arbitration that was filed in 2021. So basically, Millsap's attorney, who is Jewish, fell out with him over money, said, "You owe me for a ton of work I've done. I have a stake in your company you haven't paid me for. And so I want this to go forward." And Millsap forced him into an arbitration where the text messages, because Millsap was doing business and personal communication on a single cell phone, it was entered into discovery in that case. And so these messages actually surfaced as public record in a court case in 2021 and had not been reported. They resurfaced this year because that Jewish attorney lost arbitration. He's suing his attorneys that represented him there, and he has re-entered that evidence into the Fulton Superior Courts. And so that's where we were able to purchase, myself and Mike Jordan with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, we were able to purchase the raw text message data that was involved at the center of this case. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we last week, because I mentioned this, that I had communicated with you or asked you if you were available. You said you were in transition, and that, because sometimes we like, come on, can you be my guest? And when you don't hear from the person, you're like, oh, just let me go ahead. So last week we did look at the text messages and
Right.
what transpired. And so our focus was, this is what people are saying in front of people's faces.
Mhm.
This is what is being revealed about how they really feel. And what should we as Black people, as just people in general, when people are duplicitous in how they present themselves, how should we move forward? Do we care? Should we care? And so, you know, I surmise that it is an issue based on who the person is, because random people are going to think random things about you, and there's really nothing you can do about it. But when someone on the level of a Ryan Millsap, who presents himself in one way, but then it's revealed that that's not how he feels, but he's taking, I don't know if taking advantage is the right word, but positioning himself with people who make decisions, people who own land, who people who can sway other people's decisions, that for his interest benefit. That is important for us to address.
Sure.
So you did a follow-up to that original article. What did we, and that was one of the things I wanted to know. How do people like TI, how do city officials, how do they feel when they realize, oh, this guy was not who we thought he was? How are they feeling about this?
Sure, sure. So just so the audience knows, like if you live here, you know that Ryan Millsap is at the intersection of the entertainment industry, government decisions. He was one of the big pushers for the film tax credit, had for the film industry, had at one point considered running for office here as a state lawmaker in Georgia. So he's very influential in a number of ways. And so the reaction actually comes after his apology. That weekend after the investigation was published, he apologized. And the Hollywood Reporter had picked this up, and he said, "My sincere hopes is that the bonds and friendships we have forged speak far louder than some flippant, careless remarks." That's what he called the contents of the text messages, which included speak about the way Black people smelled, the way he was tired of doing business with Black people. He talked about, in his words, nasty Jews, according to the court record. So he called them flippant, careless remarks. He said, "I intend to work privately with all of you to use this as an opportunity to have a healthy and authentic dialogue about race and culture in a productive, not destructive manner." Well, for some people, that was not enough, including one DeKalb County, Georgia commissioner who is Black, who called the comments deplorable. That commissioner was a part of a commission that voted in 2020 to swap land with Ryan Millsap. So Millsap got 40 acres of land around a South DeKalb Black neighborhood, as he was talking about expanding his studio and promising jobs were coming there and opportunities. Well, he got the land and then he sold the studio. It did not expand. And he's sitting on that land today. We do not know what his plans are for the land, but it has been at the center of controversy because it is adjacent to what people around the world have come to know as Cop City, the police training center that Atlanta plans to build here, that has been at the center of serious protests, debates. One protester was killed there by police. And so he's kind of found himself at the center of that. We didn't hear back from folks like T.I. Or people who lead the Georgia, the film partnership, production partnership, or the Jewish Film Festival. These were all leaders who had appeared on his podcast, and we reached out to them to see what their thoughts were and did not hear back. In one case, the Black leader of the production partnership said he had no comment. He didn't want to hear about the story. Then you had others like Speech from Arrested Development who said, this is not enough. The words are hollow. The apology is hollow, and we've got to do better. And this is just not enough. So you have one government leader, who says, we would have run him out of here. We wouldn't have even voted to give him this land. Had we known how deeply racist the sentiments were, how anti-Semitic they were. And then you have some in the entertainment industry, very disappointed. And there's a whole LinkedIn thread of Black creatives who work in the film industry who are very upset. Saying, this is the part of Hollywood that we have to talk about.
So, and you know what? That was another part of what I was talked about last week as well, is that people in his position, one of the text threads between him and his former girlfriend, that his current girlfriend at that time, was that, oh, we need to hire an assistant. Maybe you can go to Tyler Perry Studios and get somebody who has experience, but make sure it's a white person. And so when people in a position to hire and fire, they make sure they hire certain people, regardless of your experience. They can determine how much money they pay you, and then that determines how much of the quality of life or what you can do with the money. It makes a difference. And so when you read things like this, Nicole, or you report on things like this, is this like how collectively, what needs to change in how we do business with people outside of the community? And when I just say that, people who would come to Atlanta or come to wherever, they come with all these ideas about what they are going to do. What, in your with your experience, how should people move with strangers or with new ideas or with all these things when you've got people right there, born and bred, who are not given a chance to do what people like Ryan Millsap was given a chance to do?
Well, all I can say is that I think, in this role, in the press role, it's important to shed light on people, to hold people accountable. And I think, in a way, this is an accountability story. What happens from here in the way that people interact with Millsap or do business with him, it could change or it could not change. And I think that then causes us to examine ourselves and our leaders. And so once so you don't know what you don't know. And clearly when, for example, there's a scene in the story where Millsap is in the Black church and he's encouraging them to be on board with this land swap deal, which concerned environmentalists, by the way. That was the big thing, that this area was polluting the Black neighborhood, and that he was going to, they worried he was going to further contribute to that. They don't know what's in his private text messages. They don't know at the time, in real time, what's happening. But people know now. And so then that's something that we have to reckon with. And how do, in a city where you're largely dependent on these communities to make things move, just by population, right? We know when we talk about the Black Mecca, talking about Black leadership, we're talking about dollars. We're reckoning with what it means to do things the Atlanta way, right? What do we excuse and what do we not excuse? How do we move forward? How are we constructive in moving forward? Or does the talk of money and development and power, does that trump our, desire to really want to tackle these things with people directly? And so I don't think we have the answer to that. I think it's on us once we know, once we know the way that people move, then, so that's yet to be seen. But, he says he's working with these communities. We'll see who works with him. We'll see how it continues. And there are a lot of things you may not know about that he's involved in right now that have not come to light. There were certainly, as many people who wanted to speak out and say something and talk about their disappointment and their disgust, There was a whole group of people that did not want to touch it. That's just as important, who have intersected with him in tangible, meaningful ways. And so that's just as important. Mhm.
So let's talk a little bit about your career, because a lot of people, I for one, I appreciate you, and I appreciate long form journalism, things, where you can follow a story or an event and don't just hit it and miss it and hit it and quit it. You know what I'm saying? I like to know, well, what about this viewpoint and what happened after that initial thing? And
Sure.
so I appreciate your style that you do. What got you interested in being an investigative journalist?
That's a good question. I've always wanted to be a journalist. The first article I wrote was assigned to me by an eighth grade social studies teacher. We lived overseas in Panama. My father was in the military, and we got a visit from Terrence Roberts, who was a part of the Little Rock Nine. And so he
Mhm.
spoke to us, and then that was my first article. And from there, I really had the bug, and really enjoyed watching CNN with my father. That's kind of how you got to spend time with him. With the little bit of time that he had off duty when he was home, he liked to do two things: to cook and to keep up with the news. And so those two things kind of really played into my desire to do this. As far as investigative is concerned, there aren't a lot of high profile Black investigative reporters in the country. And when you get down to the local levels, we're not, we don't really exist in these units. And so I never had, when I was reporting general assignment and in local TV, investigative units were usually made up of white men, older white men, including when I came to Atlanta. which so when I transitioned in, it was mainly in this effort to tell a deeper story. I was always interested in the follow up. A lot of times in local news, you can like hit it and quit it and move on. And I always had more questions like wait, like whatever happened to that? Like we're done with this, and what happened to it? So that kind of led to me working on stories and developing things, and eventually joining a unit. Plus, it was like better hours, better pay, all of that stuff. There were a lot of incentives to like dig deeper, and I also like to write, and so I was able to transition out of local TV to ProPublica and do this type of work, like we've just done with Mike Jordan at AJC. And yeah, so it's just kind of this desire to want to do it. And now, thanks to folks like Nicole Hannah-Jones and developing the Ida B. Wells Society for Investigative Reporting, and some of my other colleagues, Ron Nixon, Topher Sanders, Corey Johnson, who are founders of that, we're kind of putting this at the forefront, and these younger journalists can see us doing this work. I think a lot of times we were doing the work. Even if you take a look at the history of the Black press, there's a lot of investigative journalism that goes on
Mhm.
over the years, that's embedded in the traditional Black press, but it wasn't called that, wasn't recognized for that. And, it takes the Pulitzer Board 100 years to recognize Ida B. Wells, right? Doesn't mean she wasn't investigating
Exactly.
lynchings at the time, right? So I like to say a lot of times we talk about pipeline problems in journalism, and we don't have pipeline problems. We have very capable journalists of color, Black journalists who are engaged in this work. Whether it is recognized is and platformed is a different thing. And so I am just very interested in training the next generation of journalists and making sure that they're prepared to do this, whatever their platforms may be. Mhm.
And you know what? That's important. One, that terms change over from one year or two to the next. You might do one thing and then they're calling it something else next month, and you're like, what is that? And then once you get to know what it is, you're like, I've been doing that for years. Now they're calling it something else. one
Right.
thing. And then two, with the invent of social media, so many people think they're journalists, or they, just because you can hit, go live and do certain things and say, that doesn't mean that you are a journalist. You just have, and for, I guess, for, better or for worse, now there's a lot more eyeballs out there, so you can't hide certain things that went on that only mainstream media would cover. Now there's the, things, the, what is it, the access is there,
Yeah, yeah.
so that's good.
That's good, and it requires a lot more training too, because we have so much more disinformation and misinformation, and that's
Yeah.
the double-edged sword. That's the catch-22 with it. Yes, it is great that we have access to these platforms to, you know, um, to be able to get information out and to each other in different ways. And we have such a greater responsibility to even to verify our information. Just like in the case of this story, it was really important for us to get the raw text data, not just to read about text messages in a complaint, but to dig into the court file and get the actual data, because who's to say that it was a real document, or those are the things, like part of verifying and the process of reporting that um, people don't necessarily think about. It's easy to put things out there and cause a stir, and it's like, well, where did this come from? We need to interrogate our information. Hmm.
I agree. And so, is there at this point, are you planning to follow it through, or what are your plans to, with this story? Because I know you said you have moved on from ProPublica. What are you doing now?
Yeah, well, the first thing I have is a book deadline. So I'm writing on a book, and a manuscript is due this fall. So I am doing that along with the teaching. And we'll see what happens of the Millsap story. The great thing is that we had a partnership with the local paper here, and he is very much a local newsmaker. And so it doesn't mean that the story dies if there is something else to report there, and to follow up on. But for now, yeah, I'm head down in a manuscript, a very different type of investigating a 100-year-old story. So I'm deep in archives and writing right now.
So, is this going to be your first published book?
It is. It will be my first. It is a story of my great grandfather who passed through medical school in the wake of the first pandemic, and graduated pre med the week of the Tulsa Race Massacre. And it moved through Harlem and Jamaica and Scotland for some training, medical training. But it got me to thinking about Black doctors, their training, and their plight as we were moving through pandemics and racial tension 100 years apart. And there's so much to be able to see. You see the parallels between what we're talking about today and what they were facing a century ago. Questions about their ability, aka DEI fight, right?
Hmm.
Questions about you know the shortage of our Black medical doctors, which we found to be such an issue coming through COVID. Well, there is a reason why why we have the numbers that we have today in the field, and it's a systemic issue. And so I want to walk you through that history using the lens of my great grandfather. So it's been really satisfying, interesting work, but uh, tedious and um, time consuming in the archives, but wonderful, wonderful, interesting work.
Well, I wish you well on that, and we look forward to it. That reminds me, there was a letter that was found in the walls of a house in New York. And the letter was from a white person whose family lived in New York, but he lived in Tulsa. And the
Oh,
letter talked about, now the letter now is in the archives, National Archives, or the archives of in Tulsa. Are you familiar with that at all?
I don't know that story, but I'll tell you, I'm a big fan of historically informed reporting because to really get where people's minds were and the consequences of actions, I mean, archives are they bring stories to life in ways that we were never taught, and so it's worth the time spending that and applying that method to reporting whenever you can. Hmm.
Yeah, I will go back and revisit that as well because just what was revealed in the letter was that the city of Tulsa, or the people who had were accused of shooting and murdering and
Hmm.
going into Black Wall Street and demolishing it.
Yeah.
They had said, "Oh, we did wrong by the residents in Greenwood, and we promised to restore them, repair them." But
Right.
100 years later, you still have the descendants of the last two living
Hmm.
descendants
Hmm.
who went through the Tulsa riots,
Yeah.
that to try to say, "Hey, you have not repaired us." And
Yeah.
they're getting so much, backlash, and they're not being heard,
Mhm.
but it was clear that you said you would restore them.
Sure.
But you
So, what
still
is this debate over reparations? Right. So, if we apply the sensibilities of the past and even what was said in real time, what was promised in real time, are we still having the debate, and in what ways today? And so that's a perfect example of that. And it's so powerful to read things in people's own words in real time. Yeah, it really changes the way that we approach issues and grapple with those issues. And so that is yeah, that is one of the first to be killed in the massacre was a Black physician. And so the word had spread about that as my great grandfather was coming out of pre-med, and that's happening in Tulsa at the time. So just fascinating. Just fact. And I was looking for a book around me. Now I don't think I have it in front of me, but it's by Victor Luckerson. But he talks about this is a new book um, about the massacre that he came to Atlanta and spoke about. So yeah, there's so much to learn, so much to
Well,
learn.
and I appreciate you stopping by. We
Yeah.
certainly will keep you in our Rolodex. There's one of
Oh,
those
okay.
old terms. Keep you
Yeah.
in
Thanks for
our
having
Rolodex.
me.
No problem. So we'll keep you. And so if there's any more that we can glean from this
Yeah.
Ryan Millsap story, I'll continue to email you so we can have you back if you're available.
Okay, that sounds good. We'll keep you updated, and I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Stephanie.
Have a good one.
You too. Mhm.
And we thank you too for being a part of the conversation. That was Nicole Carr. She's an award winning investigative journalist. And, that's another reason that I think it's important. I'm a journalist by profession. Used to be a TV reporter, newspaper reporter, and since then, I'm in my second career doing something else as my main source of income. But I've also, I continue to do these types of interviews, and these types of stories continue to keep my interest because it is important for people to dive deep into issues that affect our community. And that's what, in my opinion, is what real journalism is. And that's what attracted me to being wanting to be a journalist and a writer, so many decades ago. And so that's why it's important for us to stay abreast, keep abreast of issues, not just, who's dating who, not just who is charged with what, not all those things, but what are some of the issues, that are affecting us, that when it comes to our land, our finances, our um, communities, our children, just those things should be of utmost important as we move forward, and the legacy um, that we leave for the next generation. So to find out more about the things that I care about, you can go to the written version of my journal. That's at eurweb.com. Thank you so much, and you